28th January 1945, East Prussia. The snow is waist-deep around the burning village of Reichau, and a 20-year-old Soviet sniper drags the bleeding body of her artillery commander toward cover. Her name is Roza Shanina, once a kindergarten teacher from the Arkhangelsk Oblast, now one of the most feared marksmen in her sector. Smoke licks her eyes. She presses the last tourniquet tight and lifts her rifle again, scanning the black edges of the forest. The Germans are counter-attacking, shapes ghosting through sleet and firelight. Officers shout orders drowned by mortar cracks. Comrades later described the impossible sight: a slim girl in a torn greatcoat, moving calmly through hell, firing and shifting position with practiced speed. Minutes later, a shell lands behind her. She falls, shielding the man she tried to save. Within hours, she is gone. Soon after, her notebook is gathered with her effects. A war correspondent will safeguard it until peace. The Red Army will bury its young heroine beneath frozen earth. And, for a time, the pages no one was meant to read. The war that made Roza Shanina began far from her quiet northern village. In the summer of 1941, the German invasion rolled across the Soviet Union like a tide of iron. By winter, whole cities had burned. Moscow was half encircled, and Leningrad was starving behind its frozen moat. The Soviet army, bled white, faced a catastrophe without precedent. Millions of men lost, weapons abandoned faster than factories could replace them. In Arkhangelsk, where the pines bent beneath snow and silence, 17-year-old Roza listened to the wireless bulletins in her school dormitory. Every broadcast ended with the same grim tone: fascists advancing, casualties heavy, resistance continues. Her older brothers were gone to the front. One would never return. In 1942, as the front stabilized and the state demanded new ways to fight, the Soviet High Command authorized the formation of women's sniper units. It was an act born of desperation and statistics. Marksmen, men, were dying faster than they could be trained. But women, Soviet physiologists argued, possessed calmer nerves and finer trigger control. In Moscow, the Central Women's Sniper Training School was established under senior leadership, producing a new breed of soldier: precise, patient, lethal. Propaganda would later call them invisible hunters. At the time, many commanders called them experiments best kept far from the worst fighting. By 1943, these units were feeding into the front lines, yet the attrition rate was brutal. Traditional doctrine failed them. Female snipers were often attached to infantry companies with little coordination. Many were overrun before they fired a dozen rounds. Reports to the Third Belarusian Front spoke of dispersed deployment and lack of communication channels. Entire platoons vanished in forest battles outside Smolensk and Vitebsk. In August 1943, the press admitted, carefully, that female volunteers have suffered unnecessary losses through improper assignment. At this pace, the sniper program might collapse within a year. That was the crisis. The Soviet Union had finally found a weapon that could balance patience against German mechanization, yet it was burning through its own creation. For commanders, the solution seemed administrative: restrict women to rear-area defensive sectors. But for one recruit from the north, that answer was an insult. Roza Georgievna Shanina had been a teacher at a small kindergarten in the village of Yedma, a place where days were measured by the length of sunlight and the sound of children learning to spell. When news of her brother Mikhail's death reached her in 1942, she left her post without permission and walked 80 miles to the nearest recruiting office. Twice she was rejected: too young, too thin, a teacher's certificate instead of a soldier's record. The third time she returned wearing her brother's uniform coat. That persistence earned her a train ticket south to Moscow and the sniper school. In that compound of drills, snow and silence, the doctrine was clear: patience before fire, mathematics before motion. Trainees spent 12 hours a day studying wind, range, concealment. Roza quickly excelled, hitting 5-centimeter targets at 300 meters, learning to make doublets, 2 shots so close they merged. Her instructors noted in the ledger: calm temperament, strong eyesight, ideal sniper. What she proposed, however, was heresy. In late 1943, she wrote in her field notebook that the school's method, static sniping, long waits, fixed nests, was too predictable. German spotters learned to trace muzzle flash and artillery triangulated positions within minutes. She imagined something else, a mobile sniper pair, moving with assault infantry, striking fast and fading before counterfire. It went against pages of the Red Army manual. Some officers dismissed it as recklessness. A sniper who moves, one warned, is a corpse. Yet an exception was made. She was allowed to field test mobile sniper tactics with a partner of her choosing. On 2nd April 1944, she joined the 184th Rifle Division near Vitebsk. Her first confirmed kill came 3 days later, a German machine gunner who had pinned down her platoon. She wrote simply, "I've killed a man." Her comrades told her, "That was a fascist you finished off," and she answered, "I know, but he was a man first." From that day, the impossible solution began to take form: speed, precision and movement replacing static patience. What she did not yet know was that within months, her reckless idea would turn the tide in several engagements and bring her attention she neither wanted nor believed she deserved. But before that moment came, the Red Army would test her theory against fire. The first light over Vitebsk fell on craters, frost, and crows. Roza crouched in a shallow foxhole beside her spotter, who whispered range numbers under her breath like a prayer. The new tactic, Roza's tactic, had not yet been officially sanctioned. Commanders still believed snipers belonged behind the line, in bunkers or towers, firing from safe perches with days of food and water. But here, among broken birch trunks and the smell of wet gun oil, safety was irrelevant. The plan was simple enough to be madness. Move with the assault wave, not behind it. Find cover close to the enemy's eyes, machine gunners, lookouts and snipers, and strike before they could fix the line. In training, it was called counter-observation fire. Roza turned it into art. When the first German helmet appeared between two trees, she did not wait for a full profile. Her scope caught the glint. Her heart paused, and 2 shots cracked within a heartbeat. The second overlapped the first so tightly the range marker clanged like one bullet. "Doublet," her spotter murmured, and they were already crawling away. Reports from that day in April 1944 described something unusual. A sniper pair operating within 70 meters of the assault troops, neutralizing enemy shooters before they could respond. The engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. The platoon advanced unopposed. When the smoke cleared, Roza had multiple confirmed kills, and the section leader submitted an after-action note praising exceptional coordination with infantry. Officially, nothing changed. Unofficially, officers began to ask for the girls from Arkhangelsk to accompany their pushes. In the weeks that followed, she refined every movement. Each morning she chalked diagrams in her notebook, angles of approach, lines of fire, alternate hides. 2 steps forward, 1 to the right, she wrote. Never stay where you fired. The difference between textbook and survival was seconds. Standard doctrine often required minutes for a sniper to fix, aim and fire from a concealed nest. Roza's hunts lasted less than 1. Her method cut the time enemy gunners had to react to fractions. By June 1944, the Red Army's summer offensive was underway. Operation Bagration, a hurricane of men and armor tearing through Byelarussia. The front devoured every lesson as fast as it was learned. For women like Roza, the offensive was proof and punishment. Orders came down on 22nd June 1944, withdrawing female snipers from the front lines due to losses. Roza read the order, folded it, and went anyway. She joined the infantry unit moving toward Vilnius, refusing to be sidelined while her comrades advanced. Her letters from this period, later found among her papers, are filled with defiance and fatigue. I can't stay in the rear while others fight. If I am to die, let it be facing forward. The Battle of Vilnius, July 1944, was the laboratory that proved her idea. The city was a tomb of stone and echo, every window a potential muzzle. The Red Army needed days to root out German resistance. In those narrow streets, Roza's speed became legend. Witnesses recalled her slipping through alleyways, firing from shattered staircases, vanishing before counterfire. In a single week, she logged a dozen confirmed kills. Western papers later picked up the story, describing a young Red Army sniper whose precision unsettled the enemy. To Roza, it was arithmetic, 12 fewer shots that might have struck her own men. At Vilnius, she met General Ivan Chernyakhovsky, commanding the 3rd Belarusian Front. He praised her speed and results, remarking that more snipers who worked as she did would hasten the fight for Königsberg. The compliment became an unofficial endorsement. Her method, once dismissed as reckless, now had a quiet reputation among the ranks. From there, the numbers told their own story. By 31st August 1944, she had 42 confirmed kills. On 16th September, she received the Order of Glory, 2nd class, becoming the first servicewoman on her front to do so. Within days, a Soviet field newspaper credited her with over 50, and Western clips began printing her photograph. Young face, rifle cradled, smile almost shy. Between propaganda and reality, the count blurred, but the message was clear. The method worked. In her diary that autumn, she tried to explain why. "Speed is life," she wrote. "If you shoot and move before the echo dies, they can't find you. If you think of the man, not the uniform, you freeze. I aim for the weapon." She understood the psychology of killing better than the manuals ever would. The balance between compassion and precision. Her commanding officer noted that she would sometimes lower her rifle when the target hesitated or turned his back. Yet in combat she was unerring, almost serene. By the close of 1944, her tally was widely reported as over 50, often cited as 59 in later summaries, though she stopped counting. Each figure was a shadow in her mind, not a triumph. "The essence of my happiness," she wrote in January 1945, "is fighting for the happiness of others. If it turns necessary to die for that, I am ready." Her superiors took the words as patriotism. In truth, they were resignation. Roza's technique had outpaced its creator's endurance. To survive, she had to think faster than fear, move faster than grief. But even perfection could not stop the war from evolving. The Germans were learning. Decoys glinted in windows. Bait runners drew fire toward empty alleys. Each advance became a duel between snipers who never saw one another's faces. And so the method that shouldn't have worked, born from intuition and defiance, became the front line's most effective tool in the places she fought. Yet for Roza, its success carried a shadow. Every innovation drew her closer to the front, closer to the line where death waited. By the first snows of winter, she had proven her point beyond doubt. Now East Prussia would test whether any human could sustain it. By the winter of 1944, the rhythm of the war had changed. The German army, once a tide rolling east, was now a wounded animal retreating into its own den. East Prussia was its fortress, a land of frozen lakes and iron towns where every barn had been wired, every attic turned into a sniper's nest. The 3rd Belarusian Front was advancing into this labyrinth, and among its grey ranks moved a handful of women who refused to retreat from the front lines. At their head, rifles slung low and lips chapped from the wind, walked Senior Sergeant Roza Shanina. She had already disobeyed orders once. The June withdrawal command still stood. Female snipers were to remain behind the infantry lines, but Roza's presence was tolerated now. Her results spoke for her. Company commanders who had once mocked the idea of mobile sniper hunting now requested her by role, if not by name. Yet the enemy, too, had begun to learn. Reports from captured prisoners spoke of counter-sniper units, briefed on a young Soviet woman whose shooting unsettled their advance. German platoon leaders were instructed to plant decoy helmets, to flash mirrors from false hides, to bait the invisible hunter into firing first. In December 1944, a rifle duel nearly ended her. During a patrol outside Insterburg, Roza spotted what she believed to be a German spotter on a ridge. She took aim, fired once, and the figure fell. Then a second shot cracked back from the opposite slope. The bullet grazed her shoulder and tore through her coat. Her spotter dragged her behind a frozen log, while a third round splintered the wood inches from her face. It was a trap, a dummy wired and baited. She survived, but the brush with death left her shaken. In her diary that night she wrote, "I thought I had outsmarted them. Instead, I learned how close they've been watching me." The wound healed quickly. Her confidence did not. The battalion doctor recommended evacuation for rest, but she refused. "If I can pull a trigger, I can work," she said, and returned to the line within a week. The men whispered about her in half-superstitious tones, some calling her lucky, others cursed. "She never misses," one corporal said, "but the gods keep taking her friends." It was partly true. The women she had trained with at the sniper school were gone now, some killed, others sent home. In photographs taken that winter, Roza's eyes seem older than her years. The faint smile that once disarmed photographers had hardened into a calm, no longer humanly young. The Germans' countermeasures grew sophisticated. They began setting mirror traps, small bits of glass placed in rubble to catch the sun and mimic a scope reflection. They sent runners in ragged uniforms pretending to be wounded, hoping to draw Soviet snipers out of cover. Roza adapted again. She reduced her exposure time to seconds, firing from angles that defied prediction, shifting position after every shot. Where once she stayed long enough to confirm a hit, now she trusted instinct and moved the instant her rifle barked. Each engagement became a heartbeat, each retreat a gamble against unseen marksmen playing the same deadly game. By January 1945, her kill count in official tallies was given as over 50, with many post-war accounts citing 59. She herself stopped recording numbers. The front was closing on Königsberg, and the offensive had turned into a storm of artillery and snow. Her letters from this month are filled with exhaustion. The body grows numb, the fingers stiffen, but we move still. Sometimes I think my rifle knows me better than anyone. The war was now a blur of villages burned to stubble, of faces glimpsed once and gone. The diary entries from those last weeks reveal a shift in tone. The earlier enthusiasm, speed is life, movement is victory, gives way to introspection. "I've killed a man," she repeats, echoing her first entry from 1944, "and each time I tell myself it was necessary. Yet the eyes never leave me." She had begun to understand what her commanders never could, that every innovation in killing demanded an equal innovation in forgetting. Her commanders, however, understood results. A front inspection in mid-January took stock of sniper employment before the push toward the Pregel River. When senior officers asked to see the woman sniper they had heard about, Roza appeared pale but composed. She received praise and a promise of further recommendation, and was asked if she needed rest. "No," she said softly, "I'll rest when it's over." It sounded like a joke. It wasn't. The final week of that month brought the offensive that would consume her. The order came to cross a frozen field near the village of Reichau, an exposed approach flanked by 2 German machine gun nests. Roza volunteered to go forward with the artillery observation team. When the first shell exploded among them, she pulled a wounded commander behind the lip of a ditch. Witnesses recalled her covering him with her own body as shrapnel whined overhead. A burst of automatic fire followed, and then silence. When stretcher-bearers reached them later, the officer was alive. Roza was not. She died on 28th of January 1945, at the age of 20, a few miles from the border she would never cross. Her comrades buried her by the road under a signpost made from a broken rifle stock. They placed her diary, blood-stained, still open to the last unfinished page, inside her satchel for safekeeping. A war correspondent took it when the front moved on. For 2 decades it lay hidden, a quiet relic of a soldier the archives preferred to remember as symbol rather than as a complicated human being. When news of her death reached headquarters, a brief communiqué was issued. Senior Sergeant Roza Shanina fell in battle while protecting a wounded officer. No further details were given. The newspapers that had once highlighted female snipers printed small notices and moved on to other heroes. Only the men of the 184th Rifle Division kept her name alive. carving it on helmets and trench walls before the final push into Königsberg. One of them wrote later, "When we saw the white field where she fell, we stopped shooting for a minute. It was the only funeral the front allowed." Thus ended the duel between a teacher and an empire. The enemy had finally adapted. The war had swallowed its most attentive student. Yet even as her body was lowered into the frozen ground, the practice she honed was spreading quietly through the Red Army. Other snipers adopted her mobile method. Commanders filed after-action notes describing roving sniper pairs who displaced immediately after firing. The technique she had refined without permission would survive her by decades. But in January 1945, none of that mattered. The wind buried her tracks, the snow closed over the ditch, and the girl with the rifle receded into myth. The snow did not melt for weeks after her death. East Prussia lay in ruins, villages blackened, forests splintered by shellfire, rivers choked with ice and the wreckage of tanks. But from the ashes of January 1945 rose the offensive that finally broke the Eastern Front open. Her comrades of the 184th Rifle Division moved forward without her, carrying rifles that still bore smudges of her hand oil. They had learned something from the quiet girl with the steady gaze, that a single well-placed shot could change the rhythm of a battle. Roza's method survived her. Infantry platoons now advanced under the eyes of mobile sniper pairs who shifted after each volley. Among soldiers it was simply her trick, though manuals would later formalize immediate displacement after firing. The technique shortened engagements, reduced casualties, and dissolved the paralyzing fear of German machine guns. When reports from February's operations reached Moscow, officers noticed a pattern. Units employing trained snipers in fast-moving roles often took ground with fewer losses in the tightest streets. Her death had not silenced her lessons, it had sealed them. Still, the price was staggering. The East Prussian offensive, begun in mid-January, devoured men and ammunition faster than earlier pushes. Whole battalions vanished into the blizzards around Königsberg and the Samland Peninsula. The Germans fought like cornered wolves, every field mined, every cellar armed. Soviet casualty lists stretched for pages. Quartermasters stopped counting at whole divisions. In her own regiment, survivors said that January felt like a single endless day, a blur of white, red, and the smell of cordite. The official bulletins spoke of progress, but in diaries and letters, the soldiers called it the month of ghosts. One sergeant from her division wrote home, "We cross the fields she died in every morning. The wind cuts our faces. I think she guides our bullets." Another noted the uncanny calm that followed her loss. "We no longer feared death. She showed us it could be met without panic." What propaganda never understood was that Roza had become something more useful than a legend. She was proof that courage could be learned. In late March 1945, the front reached Königsberg. The city, once the heart of East Prussia, was now a fortress ringed by moats and bunkers. The battle that followed was among the most ferocious of the war. Streets turned into trenches. Every intersection was a kill zone. Yet within that chaos, snipers trained in her style provided some of the only reliable cover for advancing infantry. They slipped through bombed-out apartments, firing from windows, stairwells, even sewers. Staff reports noted that these roving marksmen repeatedly neutralized strong points across multiple sectors, an efficiency few had imagined 2 years earlier. An April after-action report described the difference succinctly. A forward platoon was halted by automatic fire in a fortified block. 2 snipers advanced independently, using rapid displacement after each shot. Within minutes, the resistance eased, and the attack resumed. The word maneuver appeared underlined in the margin. That single word marked the transformation of a personal style into formal military practice. As the city fell and the guns quieted, the surviving snipers gathered for a photograph in the ruins of a church. They are smiling, exhausted, blackened with smoke. One of them holds a rifle with the initials RS carved into the stock. When asked later who she was, he replied, "The girl who taught us to move." But victory brought its own silence. The diaries of the women snipers who lived through Königsberg speak less of triumph than of emptiness. They had survived what she had not. They wrote of dreams filled with the echo of rifle cracks and the weight of unseen eyes. A letter from one comrade reads, "We won, but I feel smaller. The war took from us what it gave." Roza's name appeared in the casualty lists, then faded among tens of thousands of others. For a while, even her family in Arkhangelsk did not know exactly where she had died. Back in the north, spring thawed the rivers, and a telegram finally arrived at the Shanina home. It carried 12 words. "Your daughter Roza fell heroically in East Prussia on January 28th. Nothing more." Her mother fainted. Her father, Georgi, sat down at the kitchen table and opened the only photograph he had of her in uniform. She wanted to be useful, he told a neighbor later. And she was. That summer, the war in Europe ended. Celebrations swept Moscow, banners filled Red Square, and speeches thundered about heroes of the motherland. Roza's name was not among them. The state preferred its living symbols, parading female snipers who could smile for the cameras. Roza's story was considered too melancholic, her diary too personal. The state preferred martyrs who spoke in slogans, not in confessions. So the girl who had changed the battlefield was left out of the victory parades. Yet her method lived on. Military academies quietly adopted lessons from 1944 field experience when revising post-war sniper training. Instructors taught immediate relocation after firing, precision target prioritization, and movement with assault elements. Her legacy became a line in a textbook, often stripped of attribution, but never of its effectiveness. Somewhere in those sterile diagrams lay the ghost of the young teacher from Arkhangelsk, who had once dared to rewrite the rules. The true turning point, then, was not the conquest of Königsberg or the final surrender of East Prussia. It was the moment a single woman's intuition overcame an army's tradition. Against orders, against doctrine, she proved that precision and movement could coexist, that a sniper could lead an advance instead of merely covering it. Her commanders could not grasp it fully, but her comrades understood. The future of close combat marksmanship had been born in the mind of a 20-year-old who died before anyone could thank her. And as the Red Army moved west toward Berlin, carrying victory in its wake, it also carried an unspoken debt to the girl who had shown that innovation could bloom even in the bleakest winter. When the guns finally stopped in May 1945, Europe exhaled for the first time in 6 years. Flags rose above the wreckage, parades thundered through Moscow, and newspapers shouted names of heroes the nation could celebrate. Yet in those endless lists, Roza Shanina's name appeared only briefly. There was no photograph, no extended tribute to the girl who had helped invent a new way to fight. For a long time, it seemed as though she had vanished entirely. Her comrades returned home in silence. Her spotter survived the war but spoke little about it. In letters written decades later, she recalled the moment she placed Roza's diary in a canvas bag and handed it to the war correspondent who had promised to keep it safe. "I thought it would be safer with him," she wrote. "We could not bear to open it ourselves." He kept that satchel for years. When friends asked why, he simply said, "It belongs to history, not to me." During those 2 decades, the Soviet Union built its mythology. Women were honored collectively, factory workers, partisans, nurses, but individual stories like Roza's were quietly folded away. There were reasons for that silence. The new world needed heroes, not human beings. Her diary, filled with introspection and doubt, did not fit the narrative of cheerful sacrifice. She wrote about fear, loneliness, and the guilt that followed each shot. "Each man I kill," one line reads, "is a door that closes behind me forever." Such honesty was difficult in an age of slogans. In 1965, as the 20th anniversary of victory approached, the diary reached the Arkhangelsk Regional Museum. Curators read the faded pages, the ink smeared by snow and blood. That same year, a youth magazine published an abridged version, edited, censored, softened. Passages questioning the war's cost were deleted. The human voice was trimmed to patriotic cadence. Yet even through the sanitizing, readers felt something raw. Letters poured in from across the Soviet Union. Who was this girl? Why didn't we know her name? The museum displayed her photograph, a small woman with a rifle taller than herself, and crowds lined up to stare into her calm eyes. For historians, Roza's rediscovery was a revelation, surviving training records and field mentions confirmed the tactical innovations her peers had adopted in 1944-45 of the practice, advancing sniper pairs who displaced immediately after firing quietly entered doctrine in the post-war years. Instructions cited Front Experience 1944 without naming the originator. History kept the method but obscured the author. The reasons were layered: gender, politics, secrecy. Post-war ideology struggled with the image of women who killed as effectively as men. It preferred nurturing symbols, the mother, the nurse, the collective worker, over the lonely figure in a sniper's hood. There was also the diary itself. In its unedited form, it showed not propaganda's iron heroine, but a young woman questioning what killing meant. For a state that prized certainty, her words were too human. Through the 1970s and 1980s, her name flickered in local publications, then dimmed again. Only after the Soviet collapse did her story resurface more fully. In 2011, the Arkhangelsk Museum mounted an exhibition of her letters and photographs. Visitors stood before the glass case containing her diary, still stained, still fragile, and whispered as if afraid to disturb her rest. The exhibit label quoted the line that had outlived censorship: "The essence of my happiness is fighting for the happiness of others. If it turns necessary to die for the common happiness, then I'm braced to." Western historians took notice. Articles in multiple languages called her a forgotten pioneer. Yet what makes her story remarkable is not the tally beside her name, but the paradox of her humanity. She transformed the battlefield through intelligence, intuition, and compassion, the very traits her era struggled to celebrate in soldiers. Even now, few textbooks credit her by name. But the method lives on in every modern sniper doctrine that prizes mobility, timing, and restraint. What remains are fragments: the diary, the photographs, the testimonies of men who fought beside her. One recalled how she once gave her ration bread to a starving German boy captured during a retreat. Another swore she used to hum children's songs while cleaning her rifle. Such details rarely enter military history, yet they define her legacy more deeply than statistics ever could. The world eventually raised memorials to many Soviet heroines, and there is a modest stone near her birthplace of Yedma, bearing her name and the dates 1924-1945. In summer, wildflowers bloom around it, the same northern blossoms she once gathered for her students before the war began. Children from the nearby school bring fresh petals each year. Few know the full story of the woman beneath the stone, but they sense that she mattered. Today, historians argue that techniques like hers helped save lives by accelerating assaults and reducing exposure under fire. Yet in the vast ledger of war, her contribution often occupies a footnote. Credit for innovation drifted to anonymous frontline units, while her diary rested behind glass. It is a pattern as old as war itself, the individual who changes everything only to be blurred by the system she served. And still the diary endures, a whisper from a frozen battlefield. Its final entry, unfinished, reads simply, "I am certain we will win." But how many of us will be left to see it? The pen trails off there, the sentence unclosed, the ink blotted by something dark that archivists never quite identified. Some say it was melted snow. Others know better. Roza Shanina was 20 years old. She had taught children to read, then taught soldiers to see. She perfected the art of killing to defend life. And though history nearly erased her, she remains one of the few whose courage can still be felt through the paper she left behind. The question she leaves us with is not about war, but about recognition. How many quiet innovators in any field are silenced because their truths are inconvenient, their victories unfit for celebration? How many solutions are overlooked because they come from the wrong person, a teacher, A woman, a voice too honest for propaganda. Her story does not answer that question. It merely asks it again and again, every time someone opens her diary and reads the words she never finished.